finding jobs, what we could be doing better and learning from how this service has worked so far, and then developing a year-round jobs program, which is really important and dear to Councilman Burrows. We understand that the summer jobs program is an amazing program, but how do we expand that? Because we know our young people need this every single day, not just during the summer. So what would that look like to have a jobs program that works with our students year-round for placement, to ensure that they have a place to be all year round, and then also really caters to what children are interested in, making sure that we do a really diverse job placement, not just like in government agencies, but with our small minority businesses, creating pipeline opportunities for internships. So we really want to make sure with our workforce development that we think of this in a thoughtful way. Councilman Burrows' point about how we're looking at even project labor agreements in the future. So when we think about workforce development, I think he gave a great example before about making sure if we have the apprenticeship and the training programs in the school system, and then we've created an opportunity for jobs, if it's through contracts for maintenance or road repair, through project labor agreements. And then we also have requirements on hiring local residents, right, and hiring right from our school system. So we want to think about creating a full pipeline when it comes to workforce development.
The only thing I'll add to that is our current summer jobs program is 6 weeks, and based on team court for the State Superintendent's Office, a juvenile diversion program. None of those students were in that program. So you kind of have the students who know how to apply, families who know how to apply. How do we attract our most vulnerable students, link them up with a quality job opportunity? How do we make it year-round? Because 6 weeks is not sufficient. How do we put money in the pockets of our young people? And not just hiring them to work in government, but as Crystal said, we have so many minority businesses, we have small businesses, we have big businesses. No matter what a young person wants to do or wants to become, Prince George's County should be able to pick up the phone and find connections to help them. There's so many of the, and really, not only does this help them in their future, but this is I know Crystal will get to this later, a crime prevention strategy. We know that when young people are active and engaged, no one gets to take care about, they're getting paid, they're more likely to truancy will be reduced, they're less likely to get in trouble. So to the extent that we can have a strong, robust jobs program for our youth is kind of that goal. The recreation side of park and planning. Park and planning has a lot of money, and there's no reason why we'll work with this as colleagues that we could not cover the cost so that any child in poverty in our county, they should be able to play youth sports, do youth activities completely free and at no cost to them. This once again goes to the preventing crime and just helping them live a more fulfilled, full life. There's no reason why we couldn't pay all of the participation fees at all the Boys and Girls Clubs. There's no reason why we couldn't go to these big mentoring groups and say, hey, in this school, a lot of fighting. How do we partner with, I know Brother Franklin's a member of the 100 Black Men. How do we say, okay, 100 Black Men, we're having an issue at this school. You go in and we're going to put the bill for your mentoring program. We want you to expose these young people. We want you to take them on field trips. We want you to invest in their families. And we can do that, I believe, with park planning money. And then as it relates to, and I mentioned this earlier, one of the big hopes that I have, the school system recently eliminated the before and after care programs, which, I don't agree with at all, but it is what it is. Before and after care programs serve as a vital tool for families, especially families who are in poverty, especially a single mother who has to work all day so often we have so many of our young people who leave the school and they go into a house with no support or no one there. And one of the things that I would love to work on as a council is let's identify to start our lowest performing schools. And so those students leave the school at 2:25, and there is a bus outside that immediately takes them to their local community center. And at that community center, there's tutoring, there's dinner, there's enrichment activities, and things of that sort. That's something that we can absolutely fund with Department of Planning budget. Okay, well that's EWD.
Thank you very much, Chair and Vice Chair. Very comprehensive, a lot of items on that plate there. At this point, now, one thing I want to point out, that presentation was emailed to us as part of a virtual binder, so you should have access to it. Mr. Harrison, you read your computer, you saw it on the board, you have it in your computer.
I just got to grab.
So, for all the colleagues who were not part of the presentation, which is tonight, if there's any questions, comments, additions, ideas that you have, now's the time to bring those up and Mr. Burrows can discuss those with you. Yes, Mr. Harrison.
Mr. Chair, I know that you assigned your committee directors to the chair, the vice chairs of the committees. Have you assigned the other members to the committees yet?
Yes, I believe that was distributed as part of the virtual binder this morning. Although what I would say, having in the last several years been on very few committees, I go to every committee. I encourage everyone to go to every committee. And you're treated as an equal. The only thing you don't get on the committee is the right to vote on an action, which you do have equal participation.
Thank you.
Mr. Hoffman, that's not funny. I think I've been very successful as a non-traditional. Ms. Watson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of things, and I appreciate the presentation, it was great. As far as Prince George's Community College, I know certainly we want to support our students there, and one specific set of students are seniors, and they really depend on, the community college for programs. And we have a SAGE program there that currently receives state funding. However, the county doesn't support the SAGE program any longer, we used to through the Department of Aging. So I'd like us to take a look at how we can support that particular program for our seniors. In addition, with workforce development, that the library system is an important partner for our workforce development program here in the county. And so we can certainly have them do a large part of recruitment and helping people find jobs and careers through the library system. Additionally, I'd like to incorporate more apprenticeship programs. Certainly work and partner with our businesses and labor in increasing the apprenticeship programs throughout the county. So certainly want to work with people on getting that done, because I think it's important. Many of our students may not be interested in college, but they would be wonderful to train and get them started in apprenticeship programs. And I know our businesses and labor partners are looking for good people to do that. And also in regards to workforce development, National Harbor, they just recently opened the American Job Center here, and it is successful. And we do have another job center right down the street from the William Curry building. So let's not forget, our other job centers and certainly around the county as well. And they're about to bring a whole job center to the county. So look forward to hearing Walter's presentation, but that's one of my passions. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion discussion consent. Sure.
I'm sorry, I forgot one thing. As you know, the oldest HBCU in Maryland is in my district, so certainly want to support Louis State University. And, there are some things that we can talk about, that they would like to, get assistance with. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Watson. Very good points. Seeing no further discussion, need to wrap up with Mr. Burns?
Thank you. We look forward to working with everyone, and thank you, Ms. Watson, Councilwoman Watson, for all of those points, and look forward to working with you.
Okay, well, we're going to turn to the General Assembly Committee. That's the next slide of the presentation.
I don't have a slide, we just have a printout that we gave to everyone. I will be very quick, as we, just a quick overview. As you all know, the General Assembly Committee is really focused on how we partner, with our state delegation. What we're doing is that, one of the things, we already met with the chair of the Prince George's County delegation, Chair, State Delegate Nick Charles, and we went over, discussing how we're going to move forward with sharing priorities. One of the things is that he is looking forward to us providing position statements on all of the bills that would impact the county. They are doing their delegation meeting, which used to be in December, now in January. So we are waiting. We have requested the copies of bills that we're going to look at and determine on the General Assembly Committee what our positions are. Our positions, we're looking at, first of all, number one, local bills that would impact the county, putting our positions forward. And then statewide bills of interest, especially when it comes to budget, education, transportation, health, and then some of the MAKO initiatives. I would say that one of the things that we shared with Delegate Nick Charles is our interest in a lot of projects when it comes to development in the county. A lot of the projects that we want, while we're funding them at the county level, we look to our state partners for funding. So that's one of the things we're going to look at, is what are the top funding priorities, especially when it comes to development and of course education. We will have the weekly meetings, identifying bills that will be of key interest. And as we look at the people's agenda, we're looking at various parts of the people's agenda when it comes to environment, education, development, up and down even looking at our transparency, we're really focusing on health, focusing on opportunities for minority business, focusing on development. All of those things we looked at, we're going to try to partner with the delegation. I would say in the future, we will try to, instead of waiting for the bills to come, we are looking forward to actually putting forth our own agenda, and working with the county executive, but having our own agenda as a council that we will present to the delegation to look for bills that we can push in Annapolis to support the people's agenda. So we're looking forward, and like I said, we will be putting together, once we get the list, we will be making sure that everyone gets the list of bills and making sure that we actually put forth position statements ahead of time instead of waiting, which has happened before. So we're going to be proactive in our outreach to our state partners.
I'll turn to Councilmember Fisher.
Sorry.
Oh, I don't.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question and a comment. I think, one, I know you mentioned meeting with Chairman Charles, but I think there's a bit of a misnomer, at least my experience being on the other side as a former delegate. I think the communication with your state senators, or our state senators, is very important. I think Senator Brunson is still chair of the Senate delegation. I'm not sure if they're making any changes. I just think a lot of our county initiatives that passed through the House, they just died in the Senate. And so I would just say that the session is fast, and I think that as a county with our senators,
I think we need to have whatever agenda this council feels is good, you know, that's great. And I also think a more streamlined and tight, you know, the budget is one thing, which I think we've been very successful, this county has been very successful. The money that was brought back last session was the biggest the county's ever seen. And then I think when it comes to delegation bills, it's another piece. And so my recommendation and question would be, you know, how much is the council willing to put its weight behind? I would say my perspective of the process for me over the last 4 years, it's a lot of statements, but it's too many. And I don't think any a delegate and a senator should will say, these are the priorities of your service county council. And I don't think any of them could communicate to you what exactly that was. And so I think that's important, and then just not forgetting our senators, because we work so hard to get things through, and it just disappears.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, Senator Benson did reach out to me, and she wants to meet with, regarding, priorities on the Senate side. So we definitely will be meeting with her too. So, I definitely wanted to mention that. I do apologize that I mentioned that, but I will, thank you for that. No, you know, it's good to know that you having that experience at the state level. Also, Councilmember Ivy, I'll definitely be working with you all to make sure that we know the process as we go forward and working with the right people.
I think we made a point about having too many positions, if I understood it correctly.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
But I think Delegate Charles was saying, he wanted to.
He said the opposite. He actually was asking, he's asking basically all, for the delegation, for the council to provide statements on the bills, whether position or no position. So I do think on the General Assembly Committee, we are trying to make sure that we prioritize so that we don't, you know, put ourselves in, that we definitely wanted to make sure that we had positions on those bills.
Yeah, let me just correct, because we're on record, let me correct myself on the record. Mr. Chair is correct, you definitely should have position on all of those. I guess what I mean is, you know, some bills might be no, some bills might be yes, but knowing your focus, your priority, what do they want to put energy behind to get through? You know, Delegate Lewis and I worked so hard on, you know, some of our liquor law bills, right? But they get really stuck in ECM. So by the time we deal with delegation and now we're in ECM, you know, like, is this a county priority? I think is very different than here's your position on all of your storage specific bills. So the chair is correct, but that was what I meant.
Yeah, I think your point is well taken. I just wanted to confirm that I understood what Delegate Charles said. I think for the non-delegation chair delegate, they might not want to hear every last bill position. It's important for him to hear it. And like you said, for us to prioritize it, which I'm sure we will. And we normally try to coordinate with the county executive on the joint position. Hopefully we'll be getting to that in early January. Probably one of the first things on our agenda, first thing on the committee agenda come January. Just looking at the calendar, we're not going to have the first council session until the 10th, and the next day session starts. So the calendar's not working in our favor. Were there any priorities in particular that you wanted to table?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to mention a couple things. And we talked about this, I believe, at the end of the last council session, was the idea of doing something similar that Montgomery County does, where they get together with their delegations, do a legislative meeting, talking through the priorities, and even annually. And I think it's a practice that would be good for us to develop as a county. There is always the criticism that we're not on the same page with our delegations, and I think that can help narrow that gap. That's one thought. Additionally, I want to mention, you know, we do establish priorities letters in conjunction with county executive sent to the General Assembly on various things. One of the things we've never done really is establish federal priorities. You know, there's so much federal money coming. There's so much happening at the federal level that's going to make its way to the local level. Particularly, the Biden administration's put forth a number of initiatives that are going to make their way to the local level. And I think establishing, working with county executive, establishing federal priorities letter makes sense now, and I think it makes sense now more than ever. because of all the funds that are flowing down to the state and local level. That's another thing. I meant to mention, Mr. Burrows, you're part of the presentation. I would encourage you into the workforce. One of the big things, challenges we have and opportunities is building a technology workforce, a technology pipeline of technology professionals in the county. We have a lot of graduates from technology programs that come out of the county. They don't work in the county, they leave to go to opportunities elsewhere. But bridging that gap, we have tech firms here in the county. There's a new Tech Prince George's organization that's formed. I encourage you to reach out to Bernard Wright. They're working on building a true technology ecosystem. So I would encourage you to connect with him let's figure out how to create a county technology program that's going to have our young people stay in the county and become technology professionals in the county. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excellent points, thank you. Ms. Ivy, from Belgrade.
Thank you so much. I guess my experience has been that the people in Annapolis aren't really thinking about the county council once they get there. No shade on them, it's just that they have a lot of work to do, it's happening really fast. And unless the issue is controversial, that they kind of feel like they need backup on, then chances are they're not gonna give us a ton of attention. So I do think that we need to be really deliberate about the areas that we weigh in on and make sure that it matters. So I think that, Delegate Councilmember Fisher is correct on that. It's better to kind of focus in. Not that you don't give other opinions as they come across, but if it's not something controversial, if they don't need backup on it, then it's not going to be important. One thing that I do think, though, that will be controversial that we should get behind is fighting against price gouging and rent for our residents, because we all know that we're having a situation where there are, it's not the larger, more professional multifamily businesses, it's the smaller ones, some of them unscrupulous, frankly, that are really preying on our citizens and doing things like 100% rent increases. Now, no one here can tell me that that's reasonable. At the same time, they haven't invested in their facilities. So the people who are living in substandard conditions and having to pay a lot more rent for the privilege of doing so. And we need to stop that. But we're not 100% sure that we have the ability to do it. That's been a source of confusion, I guess, that it would be best if we could get clarity from the state to officially give us that right to stop price gouging. I know that's very different from rent control, which there's a lot of concern about from the reputable multifamily owners. I know that Delegate Julian Ivey has a bill that he's working on, that he's worked on with Southern Management. So obviously not one that should be raising a lot of controversy in Annapolis, but it does seem to make sense. I know they're trying to work out some of the details of it. But I think that should be a priority of ours, because if we don't have the authority to do it, then we need to do it, because people are counting on us for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? Mr. Rose, before you go, I have a question, it's a generic question, just frankly, just raising a little bit from our federal officials. We go to Annapolis, we have lobbyists in Annapolis. What is the best way for us to access our federal officials on specific items? I want to hear your idea. I was curious whether we rely on the county executive, coordinate with her, or whether we have different strategies. I'm uneducated. Alternatives
I'm just laughing because, there's Glenn, so.
He's not an early federal official.
He is not, but he's the most important one I have.
Anyway, besides knowing his items, any thoughts?
I mean, we usually, go ahead. Yes, sir.
Back in the day, we used to have
at least an annual meeting with each of our representatives. So
We do that, and it's really nice, and we give them quick priorities, but in terms of following through and seeing that something happens in specific items, I'm not sure what the strategy is.
some time ago, I think the county executive, not the current, but you did have a lobbyist at federal level that they employed, but that hasn't been the case for some time. So I think we could obviously have someone in-house and assign them that responsibility. That might be a thought, but if we don't want to hire an additional lobbyist to do that. But I know in the past, years ago, the county executive did have a federal lobbyist that worked for the county. So that's what about. One additional thing I do want to mention in this brigade, Councilman Legate, is the marijuana legalization should be high on the radar. The General Assembly Committee will move fast. And it'll be a big conversation around equity. But to your
And also, where's the,
Yeah, inclusion and location.
yes, exactly. Which is also zoning conversation.
And with that, I would mention meeting with Senator Griffith because the pubs aren't. I would
Everybody
also,
wants to hear you.
I would also mention with, the work that I did on the bill for where it is today and what they're working on the marijuana worker, it's already going. And so I would think you would take the time to talk to Senator Griffith, who is sitting on that work group now, because it's just such a big vehicle, and you notice, where Governor is going to be on some of that. I would encourage not waiting, to meet with Senator Griffith with our ideas and concerns on those topics that they meet publicly, I think it's every Wednesday. You can log on and actually watch, the marijuana, or cannabis, work group right now.
I think we're in the process, through the council administrator, we're going to create detail, we're finalizing our representation of lobbyists.
That is correct. We should have that done by, if not the end of this week, then the next.
And I believe one of them is significantly engaged in the marijuana issue, right?
That is correct.
Cannabis. Rosemary, has any? You probably need to wrap up the general assembly discussion. Does anyone have any questions for us?
Just have one priority to add. We were working on the senior tax credit bill. There was a lot of restrictions that we had. It could not exceed 5 years, could not exceed 20%. And giving the council more flexibility to decide those parameters would be helpful. If you're 65, maybe it should be at 20%. If you're 80 or 90, maybe it should be a higher percentage of relief, depending. So I think allowing this body to make those decisions would be in our best interest.
I have a question. It's interesting, Mr. Burrows. I have a question for our lawyers, for the budget people. I believe we took advantage of a statewide law as opposed to a county-owned law. So we could get a county, I'm just trying to think of the process. I believe it's a generic law across the state. Is that correct, Ms. Gresham?
That's correct.
Okay. So it's just wasn't that. I want to mention priority. I hadn't thought about this. It came up with the realtors the other day when we spoke to the realtors. Historically, there's been a problem with condo and HOAs about not having proper reserves. And Mr. Holmes put in a bill to provide for a reserve study. I think a few years ago, they put in for a reserve study. And last year, the year before, passed the bill to require the reserves to be funded 100%. And the problem for a lot of older HOAs and condo associations was they had very little set aside, so all of a sudden they had a massive requirement. And I got calls from a number of residents who worked at their property management company who were telling the boards of directors that they had to come up with tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars almost overnight. So to the extent that that's not been resolved, it would be very easy for a lot of our communities and we talked to Mr. Holmes about providing amendments that allow phasing in of back reserves. Because it's really not the homeowner's, it's the homeowner's responsibility, but it's not their fault. They didn't understand that this issue was going on, and that there was underfunding. And folks are having trouble paying HOA fee to begin with, or paying the utilities. This is a dramatic problem. So I heard from a lot of folks, especially with that. I just want to put that out.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Wilson?
I'd also say, and your comment about the realtor's breakfast reminded me of this priority, the loud mufflers. I'm sorry, the loud mufflers. And I know that there is state legislation that is looking, people are looking to do something about it. We need to be engaged in that. And, you know, we may be able to do something, we may need state legislation to do that. State may be able to pass legislation. It's a complicated issue, but we need to be engaged in that.
And funny thing is, you said the realtors remind you of the loud mufflers and the exhaust systems. I thought you were going in the direction. There was a lady who raised a great issue, which is vacant houses being taken over by the squatters.
Yes.
And it's next to impossible to get these folks out, and they run down the neighborhood. They destroy the facility they're living in. Delegate Benson Senator Benson had specific experience of her own with this situation. So we had a great conversation after we met with this realtor, and she's spot on. So
That's true.
this is something we don't normally think about it, but we have a community that raises this issue that we learn pretty quickly that it's not impossible, but it's very, very difficult to evict folks who they don't police, they have nothing to do. They have rights, and it takes forever to get in just a
Yeah, just piggybacking on that, so, you know, we dealt with that a lot in the housing crisis.
Right.
Where it was more of a question of foreclosed properties and absentee owners, and squatters would come in, the communities complaining, you can't find that owner, so that led to the creation of foreclosure registries and processes around holding the absentee owner accountable for making sure, you know, proceeding with trying to get rid of squatters, because when you don't have the owner, it's very difficult for law enforcement to enter the property and address the situation. So I'm not sure if we can take a second look at how we went about that during the height of the housing crisis. The other challenge, quite honestly, it's not easy to deal with that we're dealing with now, is you recall from a long time, evictions weren't allowed. And so that created, I think, a situation where you have a lot of folks who are, still in houses, not still in houses, but still in houses where they were paying rent, but they're not paying it now. So now they become squatters. But the challenge in getting, is the priority just to get them out, or is the priority to try to find them somewhere to go? And that's a delicate, thorny issue, but that's one that a lot of landlords are confronting, but it's also one that a lot of folks who were impacted by the COVID-19 crisis are confronted in terms of finding housing. So it's a complicated issue. It's not the same that we dealt with the housing crisis a decade ago, but it's got some similarities.
Well stated. We went through the housing crisis and the mortgage crisis. We learned a lot of things, but I think we're at a point where a lot of provisions were put into the law to protect people in their houses and make it harder to force them out. But now, in a different time frame, this is working against communities. Ms. Ivy has reminded me that she did actually at least items on her list for planning, housing, and economic development. But it's also a general assembly matter because we need certain authorities to eviction laws, particularly when you have an out-of-state bank that owns a house. It's been vacant, as Mr. Franklin said. With that, I think we're going to move on.
Well, I was just gonna, since we're at this part of the discussion, I'll just throw in my 2 cents on the issue. One thing that we also heard about at the Realtors Breakfast is that there are reportedly 9,000 properties in Prince George's County facing eviction right now. And that's something that perhaps we can have something to do with, because there are resources there that usually people just don't know about. And perhaps we could set up some kind of an office, not, wouldn't have to be a big thing with a lot of money involved, but if we had volunteers, in fact, we already know some of these people because, you know, the research, but we know people who are familiar with the resources and are really equipped to help connect people. We would have to have some people who also speak Spanish as well as other languages, but I think that it's important that we do all we can to keep people in their homes. That keeps the squatters out of their homes, and it keeps people, you know, in a better position in paying property taxes. So we want people to be in their homes for selfish reasons, and also just because we're human beings and we want people to stay in their homes. So we don't want to face the same kind of crisis that we did, you know, a little more than a decade ago. We don't want to go through that again. So that is something I want us to put on top of our list of things to do. I have a meeting I'm trying to set up now with Josephine Warning. A lot of you may know her. She's very familiar with this issue. It's very much attention and help. So I think we have great ability to help out.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to prolong, but can I just add if Madam Chair wants to get in touch with Delvin Lewis, because he's going to take, I think, my old bill and his bill that has been supported by this council and by the county executive without allowing supermarkets and certain pilot programs to have beer and wine. And so that has been supported in the past. It actually does pass delegation now every year. And if we can get out early, because that is a bill that our county wants and the committee says we're not allowed to have. So that would be very important, and I've worked on a long time, but I'd like to see continued support.
Yeah, thank you. We actually, I did, when I spoke with, I did actually respond to that bill. It was brought to me back because I was, I did connect with them, so we're gonna try to see if we can put together some sort of collaboration that we can actually do to get some sort of big push to get everybody involved. And so we will stay tuned for that because that's a priority for all of our districts and definitely for mine. So it's so we will make sure we do that. So yes, I did connect. So thank you so much.
Okay. Very great conversation. And one of the points that somebody took some copious notes. So we do have one video. Next, we're going to turn to Ms. Uriata for the Health, Community Services, and Public Safety Committee discussion.
Thank you. I'll get it started, and then for the health section, I will turn it over to my amazing vice chair of my committee, Councilman Bouquet. So for our, and we talked about this a little bit already for health and human services and public safety. What's really important for this committee for the next year is making sure that we don't lose sight of the health and human services part of the committee. I think sometimes we can be laser focused on the public safety just from the lens of police and fire, but we forget that public safety is also social services and family services. Because if you get to the root of safety and prevention work, then you're focusing on access to resources. And so it's really important that those don't become like side notes, become like front and center for the work and the initiatives that we do for the upcoming year. So I'll go kind of focus area by focus area for different agencies on just some priorities that are important. But then later on, a huge thank you to Josh Hamlin and his team, because we'll be sending out later packet with all of the different priority areas, and then giving everyone on the committee an opportunity to weigh in on the areas that are top priority to them, so that we can start in a place where we have a lot of synergy and overlap for the committee. So starting with the police and public safety section, Crime reduction is really gonna be important. And then really looking at, retention and recruitment, specifically local. One of the things that we saw a lot, especially if you followed the police reform work group, is that we got the data and we saw in black and white when it comes to the demographics of our police department, and then also the representation of actually living in the county is far behind where we would like it to be. So really tracking and understanding where we are when it comes to recruitment, what are the barriers, and how we can increase local recruitment into the county. We also really want to look at overtime, and this is going to be a common theme between police and fire, to understand how we can get a grip on overtime that looks at fulfilling vacancies, or that looks at some of the standards that we have in some of our agreements with these different agencies on how we can reduce the cost of overtime. We also want to make sure that we look at all of the adopted reform initiatives that came out of police reform work group on the county level, and then all of the things that came from the state level, and look at how they're working, evaluate them, and track the success of those different recommendations. For fire and safety, similarly, we want to make sure that we track overtime, and that we also want to look at hiring local. So with fire, we do seek to retain staff longer, but we don't tend to hire local. And so we want to figure out what's the barrier to entry for our students and our young people into the fire and EMS programs here in the county. We also really want to focus on how we can improve the relationship between volunteer and career, because we know that there's some tension there. And so we want to figure out how we can shepherd for those entities to work better hand in hand, because from a fiscal standpoint, we need volunteer fire. We cannot survive from a budgetary standpoint with full-time career. So we have to really make sure that we look at also how to recruit and incentivize volunteer firefighters. You know, that's not an issue that's just here in Prince George's County, that's an issue that's nationwide. We have less people that are volunteering. So what can we do to look at like what are the current incentives and how we could add incentives to bring more volunteer firefighters to the table. We also want to look from a corrections standpoint. We want to look at the data showing the impact of the decriminalization laws that we've seen. A good example is, I know when we were advocating for removing cash bail on the state level, but then once we took a step back, there were unintended consequences to that legislation that actually had more people staying incarcerated for a longer time. So it's really important that we don't just pass laws and not look at the data to see if they actually have the intended impact that we were looking for. Also focusing on readiness for re-entry, I think is really important, because we have a lot of programs. If you look at the website, but then sometimes when you talk one-on-one with people as they're exiting our corrections facilities, that doesn't translate 100%. So really figuring out how we can do better preparedness for re-entry to the community. I'll skip over some of them here for just time. Sheriff's Department, what I will note here, that is really important with the domestic violence work that we know has been with our Sheriff's Department. Really want to provide a uniform approach to how we work with domestic violence in the county and look at victim services specifically and how that works between the Sheriff's Department and the Police Department. So really understanding how we can bolster the resources we have around that. With the state's attorney workload, in salary for recruitment and retention is really something that I know, I think since our county executive's been in the position, of states attorney, it's probably been a common thread. So I know it's a long-standing issue, but it's something we still need to keep at the forefront, is making sure that we understand like how we can retain and recruit the best for our state's attorney's office. And then look at the diversion programs, it's really gonna be important as well. How are they funded? Is there more resources that we can give to the state's attorney for the work that they specifically do around the juvenile services? And then I'll pause for a second to let Wally talk about health.
Thank you, Councilmember Ariana. So with health, there are so many issues that cover, so I try to be brief with it, because I know that we can speak, I can talk about the health issues all day. Number one, we are gonna focus really on the behavioral health. We all talk about how mental health, behavioral health is really important. The reality is that there are some things that we do need to improve here. We're gonna look at behavioral health response, more behavioral health facilities. I will tell you, someone that represent nurses in the District of Columbia, they have an emergency room for behavioral health, which we do not have here. We also have a limited number of behavioral health facilities. And what's happening is that we also, second, have a staffing issue in our health facilities all throughout the county, especially the capital region, which is in my district. And what's happening is because we don't have many facilities, everybody's going to the emergency room. We're crowding up our hospitals, so we have to find other ways that we can build a system that can communicate, but also provide different services so that we don't overwhelm one particular or our hospitals, our biggest facilities. And also we need to look at how we attract medical providers. We do have, of course, Downtown has a lot of attraction of medical, building medical system, hospitals and centers throughout the county. But we need to set, how do we build, especially more specialized medical providers, how do we attract them to the county? Then we need to focus on health disparities, health equity, making sure how do we address some of the chronic illnesses that plague many in our community, what programs do we need to fund to make sure that we have a healthier community, even in the foods that we eat, how we live, and programs that will help us maintain our health and bring more health equity across the board. The other issue is, as you all, I will mention, I mentioned staffing, obviously, my background, I will mention nursing, but it's beyond nursing. We need nursing in every school. We need to make sure that we have proper nurse staff ratio and even tax and support staff, and even our physicians. So with the health, we have a lot of work to do, but that's one of the big overviews. Then I'm going to go down to, and of course, make health impact. I know we saw a bill supported by Councilmember Oriana and all others about the health impact assessment on a lot of the development that we're doing in the county. Those things need to be considered. So even in our development, we need to look at the health impact. So moving on to social services, housing is really important. I know we all saw that there was a recent report on housing opportunity for all. So implementation of those recommendations and more, making it easier for our community to live. As we heard Councilmember Ivy talk about, the number of evictions that we have currently now, which is very high. Looking for more resources for our homeless community. We have a growing homeless community that sometimes people say we don't have it, but we do. And if we don't address it, it will become more visible. Making sure that we have more support for our seniors. Our senior community is a large, almost over 20% of our population is seniors. So looking at making sure that we have adequate programs. Our seniors are usually one of our active groups, but yet, there's a lot that said that they don't have. We need the programs that support them. We need to make those more available. And then just the overall foster care support for our vulnerable communities. We need to make sure that we have more support for those programs, even going into some of our education. So sometimes there's an overlap on a lot of these issues. And making sure we have a living wage. I mean, we talk about who's supporting working families, making sure that we have a legal wage, making sure that we're pushing for, addressing the poverty in the county that exists. And that's when we're gonna, even talk about how we uplift our nonprofits that are focused on those issues. I know we have our grant programs, but, looking at other ways and initiatives to support, the communities in need, so that we're collaborating with our partners on this, so nobody feels like they're left behind. So I'll turn it back over to Councilman Gordon.
Thank you. And just want to echo and some of the things for the housing that's so important is that we want to make sure we do an overview of the Prince George's County Housing Assistance Program, and then also look at transitional housing, because that's really important. So we want to make sure that we look at the full spectrum when we talk about homelessness, like so immediate shelter programs, transitional housing, and then what does it look like for that person to have permanent stable housing. And then also wanted to talk about for the nonprofit sector, what's really going to be important there is that we think that there's such an opportunity that we see in certain jurisdictions like in DC and now even in Montgomery County, where the government takes a very active role with cultivating relationships with foundation and corporate sponsors. So we have, a limited budget, comparatively to other jurisdictions. But what we have an opportunity is to court funding from foundations to bolster the work that we're doing that we can have in partnership with nonprofits. So one of the things that we want to do is better coordination through the council. Right now, a lot of our agencies do grants individually, and we have our own grant office that focuses mostly on giving out grants to nonprofits that apply. But we think there's an opportunity to have a position that coordinates looking and cultivating relationships with a large pool of funders, and then working with our nonprofits and our government agencies to bolster the holes for the programmatic work that we're doing. So we're really excited about just the opportunity there to really build a nonprofit infrastructure similar to what we see in DC here in Prince George's County. We've already started talking to some foundations that are excited for the opportunity and have been looking for the opportunity to work here in Prince George's County. And then we want to focus also on reentry services, funding, staffing, and coordination between agencies, and then also looking at the opportunity for even government employees and how we really coordinated, putting our money where our mouth is, for lack of a better saying, when it comes to wanting to create opportunities for our returning citizens. And so we're really excited. This is a committee with a lot of important agencies. I know it's going to be the heart of a lot of the service that we all want to do in our district. So it really opens a lot of suggestions and ideas on how we can bolster the services that we offer to residents. We do know that the budget is going to be probably one of our biggest challenges. We understand that there's just some things we're going to want to do that we're not going to be able to afford to do. And I think that's where us thinking creatively about funding and going after federal dollars, working with our state partners for state dollars, and looking at corporate partnerships will be a huge thing about how we get a lot of this work done.
We're not just listening to all that. That's quite an aggressive agenda, ladies. Well done. Open the floor for any additional ideas and some comments. Mr. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to go back to, because I think housing plays a very important role in our collaboration with the nonprofits and from a government entity. For the individuals that take back these homes on the courthouse steps, and they don't record as the owner of the property, which they are supposed to do under state law. What are we doing to expand our land bank get process of these properties that where we can partner up with our nonprofits to create the opportunity for transitional housing. I think that plays a very vital role. I think Linda Allen plays a very vital role, and I feel like we should get a presentation about that, even with Andy Rogers.
Excellent idea. Let me ask you this, Mr. Harrison. I know you're well versed in this, and I think that's not enough. Is there legislation at the county or state level we need, or is it more taking the proper administrative action?
It's an administrative action because we have to have the infrastructure in the county to go after them for the ones that don't properly report in the appropriate time frame. So there's a loophole, which what they.
Why did they not do that? Mr.
Well,
Mr.
because,
Chair.
you know, I'm listening to my quick report,
Right.
but they get the property and then they'll do, a foreclosure internet auction. And what they'll do is they'll figure out who wants to bid on the property. When they bid on that property, they have 30 days to come up with their financing and everything. If it falls through, they submit their, security deposit, but they never recorded. So they're passing it on to the third-party purchaser, waiting for their business to be done.
So this to avoid transfer taxes?
What you said?
Is this to avoid transfer taxes?
Transfer, yes.
Yeah, this is an ongoing problem, and I do believe this is a state issue. I know that there was, improper, especially during the, recession, there was a lot of lack of reporting. So when they would get to court, you would not know the transfer over time. So, and the judges, I know that the NOSB had been big on this, that there was not proper, so they didn't even know who owned, there was no reporting. But the judges still went through with the foreclosures anyway. So I know that there's something that I did talk to, the NOACP on state level that they needed that they needed to work with the state partners to try to get some bills passed to put punishment, for lack of reporting.
And I don't even know where the jurisdiction, who has jurisdiction to block the internet auction sales before they properly record and pay that transfer of recordation. But there, while you hear about 9,000 foreclosures in the county, who knows what our actual inventory is of vacant homes and who owns those properties? It brings down value, brings down communities, and you have the opportunity to get someone in those properties where you partner up with your nonprofit sector like Habitat for Humanity and other ones to create an opportunity where it brings people together.
I think, thank you for bringing up that point, because I remember when a state bills passed around land banking, giving jurisdictions the opportunity to do that, but we as a county hadn't really taken the opportunity, so I think that is something for us to look into, because it creates opportunity for that transitional housing that we're talking about, and getting people access to being either first-time homeowner by making sure we're keeping the costs low, for the resale, or looking at doing partnership for transitional housing. So I think that is an avenue that we can look at for partnership.
I wanted to just make one last comment, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind. 2 years ago at a retreat in College Park, Ms. Rogers came in and she talked about land banking and where they were at with that from the executive branch. I think it might be helpful to hear an update on that as well.
Interesting point, I guess. I'm not sure we have a plus over this issue, but technically the housing issues come up under planning, housing, and economic development committee. Because some of the social service matters that are related to housing are part of the HHSPS. So we'll work out which committee should handle which aspects of this. One of the things that I think a lot of them are concerned about is that when the committees were restructured, PHED got way too much on its plate. And offloading some of that is beneficial. We don't want to overload another committee. So we will wrestle with the balancing. But in any event, we will definitely take this up. Great suggestion, Mr. Harrison. Do we have other suggestions, comments? I want to make a suggestion, Ms. Royale. Something that I've never seen in, 13 years in the council. Discussion, a robust discussion amongst the fire service folks. We've regularly gotten briefed by the fire chief. That happens. Sometimes we see the career folks there, the fire commission comes and briefs us. I've never seen these issues put on the table, but having the fire chief sit next to the career leadership, sit next to the Prince George's Fire and Rescue Association leadership. So what ends up happening is folks come to your office and give you one story, and the other folks come to your office and give you a different story. And I don't know so much about the fire service, so I kind of agree with everybody, but none of it adds up. And so we have a serious issue. And my understanding is that we're going to have a new issue due to lack of staffing. We're talking about taking career folks out of some of the volunteer stations across the north end of the county and centralizing them into a county station. And it's unclear what happened with the volunteer station in which the career staff would be pulled. They're kind of being left, if I understand this correctly, and since I only heard this from one set of parties, I don't know how accurate it is, but it's a concern. If that's the discussion that's going on, we're going to have a variety of career county volunteer stations staffed by volunteers who can't staff them during the daytime. So they're going to be, if this is correct, we're going to be relying on coming out of one station, and that's going to lower, in my view, it's going to lower the level of service. So we need to understand where things are with staffing with the fire department, how serious this issue is, what is being done about it. And my experience over the years is that the volunteer recruiting has not been very strong. I've always felt that the impediments to volunteer recruiting, and that issue been going on for years. And then when COVID came, well, COVID itself was an impediment to volunteer recruiting. So we're at a point right now that volunteers are down. So the question is, do you want to put them out of business, or do you want to take the effort to figure out how in these difficult circumstances we resuscitate? Okay. And I think everybody needs to put their ego aside and figure out what's best for the county citizens and the county fiscal purse. This is a very complicated situation. There's a lot of egos involved. Let's not worry about it. Let's worry about how we solve this problem. Because staffing is a huge issue. And finding people these days who want to do these activities, whether it's in EMS or fire, or both, it's apparently challenging for all jurisdictions. Mr. Harrison, something you make?
No.
Okay. Anyways, I'd love to see that conversation side by side and encourage a frank, honest, professional, debate about the issues in the near future. Anything else that would be helpful? Human Services Committee. I think your program is so robust that we got keep covered the gamut. We're out of time, 11:50, so let's move along. Thank you, Housing and Economic Development, Ms. Ivy.
Thank you so much. I've been trying to consolidate it a bit. I think generally speaking, we all know that we campaign on transit-oriented development, but then it doesn't happen. It's a lot of things play into that, but we want to make that a real priority so it actually occurs. One thing that I know we have to overcome, when our metros were built in floodplains. So we need to be able to deal with that and find ways to build in those spaces anyway. I know that we generally don't like to build in floodplains, but certainly it's not something that I like. But if we can't do everything, one thing we need to do is build around metros. So we need to figure out how to do that. We obviously, we want to do things like increasing, to make it more walkable in our communities. We need more sidewalks, we need protected bike lanes. I think that it's important when we say it's a bike lane, and to the extent it's just a lane on the street with paint on it, it's really just a bullseye for people who are going over. So, people don't want to ride a bike someplace where they don't feel safe. And so we need to make sure that our bike lanes are protected and that they're connected. Because if they're not connected, then they're a lot less useful and used. We wanted to increase all of our public transportation options, which is really more transportation section issue, so I'll speak over that. We want to limit our townhouse development, because people are growing weary of seeing some townhouses spring up in the area. I do think that there's a place for them, but the place isn't sprawled out all over the county. It's got to be more compact in areas around metros. It makes a lot of sense to have one kind of design we really do need to focus on is universal design, which is something that gives the people who live in our county who are older. We have 16% of our county's population is over 65 years of age, and about 10% of Maryland adults have a disability. And of the people over 65 in our county, 30,300 of them live alone, according to the Prince County Health Department. So if you're living alone and you're older, you really need an accessible space so that you're safe. And one thing that the Council for Disability Awareness says, they say that 1 in 4 of today's 20-year-olds can expect to be out of work for at least a year because of a disabling condition before they reach the normal retirement age. So over the course of your life, from the time you're 20, things are going to happen to you. And during that time that things are happening to you, if you don't have a safe place to live, that you can move around, you're not going to be able to stay there, which ends up costing us all money. And it says about each year, about 5% of working Americans will experience short-term disability, which is 6 months or less, due to illness, injury, or pregnancy. I know that next month I'm going to have foot surgery. I'm going to be laid up for a bit. And I didn't have a house that I could spend all my time on the first floor. I really be trapped. So fortunately, I do have my house set up that way. And I'm grateful that I was able to think ahead when we were building an addition to make sure we have a shower on the first floor. And to make sure that we have ways to get in and out of our house without going up and down a lot of stairs. So there are a lot of things that can be done that aren't going to cost a lot more money. It's just being more thoughtful. You know, I spoke to Bill Chesley about this a while ago, and he was surprised to learn that he has a son who's been in the military for 20 years of life. He's in his 20s. So, you know, he understood what I was trying to do, and he's been helpful about including that kind of development as we require it. It's not something that he complained about in the one development where I got him to just put in a few, right? Okay, I'll put in a few. Well, now we can say, to the extent that it makes sense and is possible, we'd like to see it generally. Now, it's not going to work for every single piece of land. It's not going to work for every single situation. But we need to find a way to make that more the standard than the exception. There are people who, you know, you don't expect anything to happen to you, and then it does. Or you don't expect anything to happen to your parents, and then they have to move in with you. So these are all things, you know, I went through that in my own life. And I think it's important that we be smart about that. And then, of course, the 9,000 properties that are currently facing foreclosure in our county. We really do need to focus on that and make sure that our homeowners continue to be homeowners. And we have, this all kind of ties into the homeless issue as well, which has increased dramatically. So we need to make sure we do all we can to keep people in their houses. It's definitely something that we need to greater homelessness just by obviously losing them. So those are kind of the basic things I think in D5 looks like to be moving forward to transportation, infrastructure, and the environment. So I will let Councilmember Olson discuss that. I don't know if anybody has questions or comments.
So, any comments or suggestions for community housing?
I did send around an article earlier. I hope if you haven't already opened it, if you would. It talks a lot about how, when you're looking at the climate impact of your area, the New York Times did a big article, and it's got an interactive map which works on the laptop, but doesn't work up there, so we're not putting it up. But you can go it yourself, as I sent it to you this morning. But well, what is interesting is that the areas that are denser are not the areas that are creating the most climate impact. Because those are the areas where people walk more and use transit. It's the areas that are far flung out. And if you look out in like Fairwood, Woodmore, Mitchellville, Westphalia, those are the areas that are actually having the greatest impact on our climate, on our environment. And the areas closer in to the DC line have less impact. And I think that it's something we need to be thinking about when it comes to development. So it's, I thought it was a really interesting article. It was a really great impact to take a look at. Now, part of the impacts have nothing to do with, the kind of house we have. It's got more to do with the kind of life we live. And people who are very wealthy or much wealthier have a tendency to own more things that have a climate impact and fly more, which has a climate impact. But if even taking out those things, they showed you in New York City, areas that should have a greater impact if you think about it because it's so dense, don't, even though they're wealthy, because they use so much public transportation. So public transportation is something we need to really focus on more in our county. I know when I chaired the delegation in Annapolis, we made sure that we extended funding to the bus for the southern part of the county, because that is an area that was really suffering from lack of service. I'm not saying what we did then is made enough of a difference today. I thought it was down there. But I know that we need to do more in every part of the county for bus service and for metro service. And other things, I think under bus rapid transit is something that's been bounced around as well. And of course, bikes.
I remember when Mr. Burroughs was a high school student, the county council voted several $100,000 for high school students and a lot of buses there for school. And then the fiscal crisis came up and we went back. So my question is, why didn't Mr. Burroughs on the top of this issue?
Well, actually, that's a real thing as far as, DC, the school kids just use the public transit. And here, we're worrying all the time about not having enough bus drivers.
I'm being facetious, obviously, but it is something that we really think about, providing education, transit, and seeing how we can do that. I noted, and I think a lot of people have raised this question, and so some people in Barton County, I don't know some question, but having activity buses at schools to take students to activity centers. On a personal level, I've argued with part of the planning leadership that if you want concentrated centers, multi-gen center, that's nice, those kids can't get it. not every school, so we're the training aspect. And that's never been resolved. So I'm glad that we support this presentation. Just want to make a note, we originally scheduled partner planning to do us on Thursday, early afternoon, about how we make that for 2035, but due to the scheduling issue, we're putting that off. We'll look for them to brief us in early January, where we're mentioning 35, so we can just get an update, and as we all start our 4-year term, how we're doing and where we need to make progress. I think there's some good news and some news that could be. 12 o'clock, so we got a half hour, give or take. We'll turn to Mr. Olson for transportation, infrastructure, energy, and environment. Mr. Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so we have a number of agencies and issues, under the jurisdiction of TIE, that includes the Department of Environment, Department of Public Works and Transportation, WSSC, WMATA, and Purple Line Transit, transportation oversight, including taxi cabs and limousines, the energy manager within OCS, agricultural and soil conservation, and as Councilmember Ivey mentioned, there was discussion about moving some or moving DPI or parts of DPI into the TAE unit. That's still a little bit of an open question what that would be, but I'm going to go through look at that today. Within the Department of Environment, obviously probably the biggest biggest couple of things are implementation of climate action plan. We know that took a lot to produce that draft plan, and there's a lot in there. Obviously, climate change is the issue of our age globally, and we need to do our part locally to make sure that we're being good stewards of our planet, and that we're moving things forward. We're certainly not making things worse, but making things better. And on Thursday morning, we're having a briefing of about the climate action plan here. So I'll let them do the briefing on that and discuss that. Obviously, the things that we're going to need to really dig into climate action plan. But I think that's the kind of work that we're going to focus a lot on in TIE, over the next years. The other thing is, sort of resilience to climate change, flooding and stormwater. I know that I assume that everybody else's district is having the same issues that we're having in District 3, but being out in the community, there were water issues in parts of District 3 that never had water issues before. We can't stop that because the intensity of the storms is growing, and these things are happening in our neighborhoods. There's flooding, there's basement flooding, there's street flooding, and we need to make sure that we're dealing with things off street. And that's of course on development. That's also looking at innovative ways to capture stormwater before it enters the streams and creeks. Retaining it, using environmental site design, those types of things. So we need to look at a whole host of things around flooding and stormwater. And I know we have the Orbeus and all that, which we need to continue to work that's happening. So DWT, Department of Public Works and Transportation, that's another huge area within the jurisdiction of TIE. As Councilman Ivey discussed, obviously this is partly a planning issue, but it's also just getting stuff built issue. So sidewalks, infrastructure, bike ped infrastructure, and making sure that we're doing the best we can to get things built and connecting our neighborhoods, connecting neighborhoods to commercial areas, to schools, to transit. We're looking at getting people to from places. We need to make sure that people are accessible by foot and by bike. Completely green streets. That's something that there is a policy that when new roads are built in the county that they're done in a completely green street way, which means environmental, which means accommodating, all users. And we need to make sure that we're doing that, and also that developers are doing that. When new developments go in. Road conditions. I mean, that's, I know there's money is the issue there, but we need to make sure that we're doing better on road conditions in our neighborhoods. I'm sure you're hearing a lot of the same things that I heard in our neighborhoods, and we've seen a lot of conditions on some of our neighborhood streets. The bus and other transit, we need to make sure that that's efficient and serving the public. And so that's under TAE as well. WSSC, that's for those of you who've been around for a long time, we do annually. We look at the race, we get together in Montgomery County, and a whole host of things, the type replacement program. We got to get ahead of things before pipes break. We got to make sure that the replacements are happening. And so, staying on top of the WSSC on that. Also, I know, we've all dealt with residents who have need the reimbursements when there's the flood or the damage, that has happened. I know that's been a challenge sometimes. So, we got to do our work with the WSSC. WMATA and the Purple Line, we got to work on increased ridership. On that is on it's the system that we've lost ridership significantly through the pandemic, and we make sure that we're doing everything we can to encourage ridership to increase in many ways. Funding has always been we need to look at how do we get some dedicated funding. Source sustainable funding, and you look at the infrastructure around the stops, and obviously that goes with PHET as well. We make sure that we're having regular briefings by these agencies, and we make sure that when the Purple Line, we're looking at 2026 opening, but that the Purple Line is, and people can use it, can get to and from it on foot and bike and easily. It's not a metro train, it's a light rail, so there's not parking around it, but we need to make sure that we are doing the best we can to ensure that when that launches, it's ready to go, and that encourages employment, that encourages housing, that encourages communities in place of looking around the Purple Line. We'll obviously be working a lot together on that. Councilmember Fisher. And let's see. So I understand actually the energy manager is not yes, it's a lead now, so I'm corrected on that. But the energy manager, we're reducing our county's carbon footprint. We need to be looking at the increase in use of clean energy and electric vehicles within the county. So it's everything within the county, how we're using energy and how we are purchasing energy. So that's something that we spend a lot of time on as well. Not going to get too far into DPI because we're still where everything's maybe housed, but clearly DPI, the permitting, the time to process things, the staffing. It does seem like there's a lot of vacancies, there's filled, we figure out how that can be done. Inspections, code enforcement, we need to be sure that it's responsive and effective as possible. We think what tools we might need more of, and looking at our reservoirs and how those are managed and how those are, our neighborhoods. We want to make sure our neighborhoods are clean and safe as they should be. We don't have, if our neighborhoods aren't clean and safe, then nothing else really matters. We need to make sure that we are on top of all that. So I'm going to pause there to see if there's any questions or concerns. Mr. Chair, if you have anything to add.
Well, if it's comprehensive, I have something to add, but I forgot it already, so hopefully if we have a discussion on top, I'll think of it. Other folks will weigh in, Mr. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chair Olson, for the briefing. Wanted to ask you about the Department of Public Works and Transportation. I know a couple of years ago, let's say 3 years ago, we had a briefing from that agency, and we had a very broad discussion on microtransit and how that correlates, not necessarily to expanding bus services to the south, but getting into those rural areas to make sure that there's transportation equity. And how do we go about that? What's the best use of mechanism? Another point I want to bring up, the taxi cab commissions are, they're regulated. One entity that's not regulated is microtransit. What are we going to do as a county if we have jurisdiction to look at some sort of regulation? I've been hearing horror stories about some of these companies. And it's really hard to hold them accountable, that we look at that as well.
Thank you, Councilman Harrison. I think that's those are good points. I think those are good things to look into. I think we need to look at best practices out there. We're clearly not the only jurisdiction facing these challenges, and I think that you're right. We need to look at what types of further regulation as necessary, it very well may be, and see what we can do based on some of the best practices out there.
I just wanted to also reiterate, I heard from a particular entity we've all heard of another one, and there's been some discriminatory practices that they've encountered with microtransit and problems with making sure that there's transportation for those individuals that are suffering with some sort of disability. So something that we definitely have to take a look at. And I just want the opportunity to bring that up.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you.
Other comments? Mr. Rosenberg?
Yes, one thing that we're spoken to Chairman Olson about, that I want to kind of raise is DPI. There's not a week that I don't get calls from members of the community with great concerns about DPI, from our small minority businesses who can't get their permits done in on time. One inspector says one thing, another inspector says another, and then they contract out to someone, and they're all incompetent. Meanwhile, we're crippling the small business or even the church who cannot survive in this way. So that's definitely one area. And then also just from our citizens, when there is a person who is doing something in their community that they probably don't have the purpose for, and then it says it's closed out to the 311 systems. Like, what does that mean? So there's a big disconnect between 311 and DPI, and then the resident has no clue what's happening. So any focus, additional folks that we can put forward, the oversight of DEI would be helpful.
No, absolutely. We have talked about that, and I think a lot of us have heard, in fact, just last night, I got another email from someone, it was a organization, a religious organization. They were told that money for years. That just didn't make any sense to me. So we're tracking that down, but, we need to dig into those issues. Because you're right, I mean, when a small business person is trying to build their American dream, and they're living off money that they borrowed, and it takes months. Those are things that can happen because they'll else from the surrounding jurisdictions. And so, I know we have good people over there. I need to know that we just need to make sure that they have resources and tools to get things done, and we need to partner with them and make sure that those things get done, and understand what the issues are. So, again, we're talking about where things are going to be housed and what committee they're going to be housing, but I definitely would be involved in all those issues and work to resolve those in the future.
From the historical group, Mr. Olson and I used to work together on the Transportation Housing and Environment Committee back in 2007 and 10. And we were given the task of improving services from DER, predecessor to DEI. We actually made pretty good progress at that time. So we're bringing the band back together. And we're going to be focused on this. I'm the vice chair of the TIE. I'm not chairing any committees or vice chairing the other committee, and we're following Mr. Olson's leadership on this. But the issues that were here when I came in 2002 have come back around. Things have changed. And the number one issue for DEI is lack of staff and lack of senior staff. And the same issue that we raised in 2002 exists. The salary structure is too low. So they can't hire the people they need. But they lose the people they hire. So if we raised this issue, I think last year, we were told, we're looking at it. We're going to look at the salary structure. Well, I can tell you from looking at it, it's only take you 20 minutes to look at the salary structure and realize you're not going to get the people you need. That needs to be fixed. The other thing related to this, I forget which of my colleagues brought this to our attention, there's all these vacancies. If you look on the county website and see where the job listings for the vacancies, they don't exist. Okay, so you have vacancies, you have a bad salary structure, and you don't even have jobs advertised. The question that I have is that DEI's? I'm confident the answer is no, that's not DEI's. They don't put the jobs on the website. They don't decide how many jobs they can put up. So it's one thing for us to approve a budget with 250 jobs, but if OMB is only approving 150, we're just doing this giant salary lapse and a slush fund that looks like we're trying to do something we're not. So I'm going too far ahead.
No,
In 20 years,
No.
it's like, can we cut the crap and deal with the problem?
Right.
Okay, because it's the same problem that's existed for 20 years. And I'm not blaming the director. I'm not blaming anyone. I just want to say, as a solution, we kind of know the same problem, the other problems. In terms of getting to where you need to go. If you don't have the staff, you're farming stuff out to contractors. Mr. Burris said it'd be conflicting answers as to what the proper procedure is that you should follow. It's very discouraging to everybody. I know that, so you other than this, we're out.
I was just gonna expand on what you were saying. I mean, we were told there were 38 vacancies at DEI. And so we were told that our orientation and someone who had experience in that, so you should apply, take a look at it. And if I'm zero advertisement, on the kind of system, they looked into it, And nope, nothing was advertised. And, but also on the website, it says, seems to be the fact of, we're experiencing a delay in processing things because of all vacancies. So we need to understand that. And yeah, but again, I'm with you. It very well may not be DPI's fault. It may be, within some other agency or somewhere else in the county system. But the bottom line is we need to get on top of it.
It sounds like you started that last stage. Mr. Real?
Yeah, one of the points I think, Ed, to your point about the relationship with like 311 and tickets. Another thing that was brought up in our orientation is, I thought it was a glitch, when community comes to me and they say, okay, I put in an issue around an abandoned vehicle, and it says it'll take 2 years to close it out. And I realized it's not a glitch. These are the agreed upon timelines of completion for DPI. So I think one of the things I'd like to also prioritize is a work plan to get those timelines down. Because I get that these are the timelines they've agreed to for each of these issue areas. But if we could work together with them on a timeline to reduce the time that they say it's gonna take to fix a lot of these issues, because every single community member raises this as a tension point, that they're being told it's gonna take years for any issue that they're putting into 311.
Absolutely.
Anything else before we move on to this position?
Yes, sure. I have two things. I think one as well, and I think it's more of a cross between DPI and maybe the Office of Community Relations is, there's always education versus punishment when it comes to, code and enforcement. And I think in my district in particularly, there's not a lot of education or even like bilingual pamphlet on this is what you need to do to be a good neighbor. This is like the information kind of keep your home. And I would love to see us invest in that. And then of course, you have to enforce. I'm all for enforcement, but you also can't, it's not criminal court, absence of knowledge of the law doesn't, it's not a defense there, but I think for us, I think it's a point.
It's a good point. I'm going to address that because
Okay.
it's a very good point. DPI has a 12 or 14 page pamphlet in English and Spanish, which is really nice. It doesn't have everything that I would like. I actually we asked them for copies, we would distribute them, but they didn't publish them. So that's a
Okay,
problem.
so, and also, language is not always, sorry, Mr. Chair.
So I took all the text, stripped it out, put it on a folder over 8.5 by 11. We distributed a couple thousand of those in my district last year. But my point being, they do have something, and I think it's safe to add, but we should work with them. You're raising a great point. I'm just letting you know that there's something that's kind of there, but we need to make it better and more useful. So back to your point.
No, sorry, Mr. Chairman, nothing, and that is a great point. And I'd also say for my community in particular, also, just putting something in Spanish is not enough, right? The literacy rate in Spanish itself, there's also a gap there, right? So someone might be conversational, but you writing it out in Spanish is also not helpful. So I think you also have to have like a visual aspect, more like, graphic, like more visual aspect for the levels of all the different education and language levels that we have in our county, as well as just, it being written in 13, like no one in my district reading 13 pages, you know what I mean? So I think that is that part. And then the other thing that I think maybe I should have brought this up with Chairwoman Ivy, but I'm not sure. I think it was an intersect between the housing and the transit. We talk a lot about, and I saw a lot of our council leadership's agenda around housing, but I also am very passionate about affordability, especially on rental space for small businesses. For me, when it comes to Purple Line through my part of the county, or our District 2 part of the county, making sure Black and Latino businesses can actually afford a small business space at a Purple Line stop. Like, it's just no point if it's, they cannot find, my residents cannot find economic opportunity as well. not just the affordable housing part, but that they cannot afford the rent on their store, you know, as these transit, hubs occur. And so I think that's, it all intersects, you know, why are people, you know, doing things that are not within county code, because doing it outside of county code is just more affordable. And so I think it's also meeting somewhere, in between. So I just wanted to put that on the agenda point as something to also think about and hopefully to make a priority as well.
Those are all good points. Okay, we're almost out of time, so let's see if Mr. Burrows can do a 3-minute, not possible, I know. We're not just gonna ask you 3 minutes, but, run through PowerPoint, and then we'll take some questions. We can all wait a little bit for lunch, we need a full hour.
It's very cold in
Oh,
here. Is there anyone who-
Yes. I agree.
It's freezing. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
I agree.
I'm so cold. Okay, I'm sorry. That's why I want to sneeze and cough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll speed through this, and Anya, who is in policy, our policy team had so many ideas as it relates to all of the committees, but frankly, her ideas were much better than mine. And so instead of trying to memorize them and regurgitate them to you, I asked if she would just kind of give us an overview of some of those ideas.
Good afternoon, everybody. Once again, my name is Anya Makarba, and I'm with the. Does it work? Hello?
Yes, just get closer to it.
Okay, good morning once again. Well, I guess good afternoon now. Once again, my name is Anya Makarba, and I'm with the Budget and Policy Analysis Division. And I was asked by Mr. Burrows, the chair of Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee, to outline some ideas for your consideration as you work to develop goals and priorities of Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee. And these are not exactly my ideas, actually came with input from all of my colleagues. So these are not in any particular order. Okay, non-department spending oversight, and this would include evaluation to what extent when it comes to public relief funds, you may need to ensure continuity of effort to some of the critical programs. Looking at oversight for capital improvement program, looking for improvements and efficiencies in grant funds management. I know that's one of the topics that have been touched upon already. Continuing oversight for implementation of the Blue Ribbon Commission recommendations. Looking at countywide risk management, which includes workers' compensation. Looking at fringe benefit costs, looking at various components, making sure that those are understood, and therefore there could be some potentially efficiencies that could be realized in fringe benefits arena. With regards to legislative branch, looking at the implementation of CR 068, which seeks to apply equity lens to Prince George's County governments. Looking at employee recruitment, employee retention, time to fill vacant positions, or the length of the hiring process, understanding how all of these processes work in the county, since this is once again a recurring issue. And with regards to Office of Central Services, looking at contracting and procurement reform, and updated evaluation on the effectiveness of local and minority business contracting programs and incentives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And, you know, she didn't know she was doing this until they started. So you did a phenomenal job. So that's going to be a lot of our focus to add to that. The Vice Chair will add to that. But we want to be laser focused with implementing bills that will uplift our small minority businesses. And we want to be able to draw a straight line between this bill and then more opportunity coming for our small and minority businesses. We've been meeting with them over the summer and even up to last night. And it's clear that there's additional support that's needed, and we want to make sure that we provide that support. This is also the committee that will house all labor bills. We're very excited about that. project labor agreements and things of that nature, both for the minority business and for the labor side. And I'll just be very quick on that. There's this notion that minority businesses and labor cannot coexist or work together. And when I meet with the minority business community, as I did last night, I hear time and time again that there are not enough opportunities for them in Prince George's County. And there are currently 0 project labor agreements. So the notion that the reason why the minority business community cannot thrive is because there are PLAs is just simple false. And we're going to destroy that notion in this community. I'm happy to do that. So, yeah, my share, rather than go on a rant.
A good rant. Because I think Councilman Rose' point, what we want to make sure is that we create a relationship and opportunity where both are working families, because that's the heart of when you say labor. Not everyone is going to be able to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone is going to have the opportunity to own their own business. But we want to also build generational wealth, right? And we want to create and have a space for entrepreneurs. So how can we create a society where both things are true? I think all of us want for our working families to have living wage jobs and have access to healthcare. And we want for us to build generational wealth and have these businesses, look like a reflection of the county and live in the county as well. And I think one of the things that's, to Councilmember Fisher's point around creating opportunities for small businesses to actually thrive is going to be a priority. Because when you think about even inclusionary zoning, we always really talk about that from a residential concept of making sure that there's lower costs or some type of scaled cost of living in new development. But we should take that same concept for small businesses where there's a scale when it comes to the cost of the retail space. We had a great opportunity to meet with the leadership of even the National Harbor, and they have a great program that's specifically about housing small businesses and giving them an opportunity to pay a reduced rate. I think it's like 17 spaces that they use for this program, but there's not really the coordination with like the Economic Development Corporation, with the entities for our small businesses. So just taking opportunities when we create these big developments to make sure that there's a pipeline and a way to coordinate with our small minority businesses in a more thoughtful way is definitely going to also be a priority for us.
And one thing that Councilmember Ivey has put at the top of our radar to ensure that when we're doing any of the PLAs, ensure that we're actually hiring people from Prince George's County. So our intention is to pull up people, recruit, hire, and train people who are Prince Georgians and put them to work on Prince George's County projects. And then also, we want to look at our pilots. We give away so much money in pilots every year. And it's so important that we do a comprehensive overview of that to make sure that we're actually getting our bang for our buck. And that's something that Councilmember Harrison and I talked about yesterday. Councilmember Watson. And I were meeting yesterday. So that's GFP. Now, I have my share, I think, since the lunch.
All right, any other questions for our leaders? For Councilman Rivera? Councilman Franklin, have a question?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I know we're gonna have this conversation probably during the later session. I did wanna push back a little with Mr. Burrows. Minority district community, it's not that project labor agreements are the cause of them not having as much opportunity. It's just like one more. So the construction industry has for a long time had challenges with diversity and challenges with particularly diversity of opportunity for Black businesses. And that is why there's been so much policy making into this area. That is why there continues to be. And we passed a number of pieces of legislation last year to continue to push in that direction. But if you look at the profile of most of our minority businesses in the county, you will see big challenges when it comes to the revenues, big challenges when it comes to the margins, and big challenges when it comes to their ability to bid against larger companies that do have the economies of scale, that do have the ability to independent and much of and which do have greater access to capital than they have. So that's really just in general framing the issue in terms of the challenges they've had. I do think we have to, if you genuinely want to see increased opportunity, particularly for Prince George's County-based MDEs, you're going to have to work with the labor, the construction trade unions to get more, to do a better job recruiting Black and other minority businesses in the county into their union signatory agreements. The inability of them being able to do that is one of the reasons why project labor agreements can be exclusionary when it comes to our minority business community in the county. And so that's a lot of your gap. And so I understand you genuinely want to do both things, but the difficulty with accomplishing both things is that there has not been an effective effort to include more, particularly Black construction companies, but other minority constructions in the county into the union signatory ranks. I'll also mention that you have challenges on workforce. I know I'm standing between you and lunch, but you mentioned the asbestos contract for the school system. They hired 3% of the people they hired were Black. Okay, so again, we've got to, in a 64% Black county, we've got to again talk about these issues of diversity that are big challenges when you start to talk about project labor agreements. Hopefully, we'll be able to maybe have a further conversation during the session after. Thank you.
And I'll say with that, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe over 70% were Prince George's, and 97% were minority. And a lot of them had children in our school system, so they deserve to be put to work too with quality jobs, healthcare, retirement, and benefits. I think the same standard that we are trying to hold our labor community to, we must also hold across the board. Because I cannot articulate to you, and I'm not sure how many people could articulate to me, how many Prince George's County residents and what the racial demographic breakdown would be on some of the MDE business set-asides that we've done. Across the board, we should know, are these MDEs in the county hiring Prince George's County residents or are they not? And so we should hold labor to a different standard. What we do know with labor is that they have healthcare, benefits, retirement, sick leave, things that are essential, things that so many people take for granted. So our committee will be pushing this project labor agreements.
I actually have a question myself, and Councilman Franklin, I'm just asking because you've been on that council for a long time. I will say this, starting with, following the point that Councilman Burns made, I've actually made the effort to visit almost all the apprenticeship programs that we have, centers that we have in the county that's run by labor, and be sure to ask, what are the percentage of county residents, and I would actually talk and see the county residents there being trained out. Obviously, that labor background, so labor is really, really important to me, and it is important that we do have our local members walking into good paying jobs who live in the county. So we definitely will make sure that every project that we're talking about high residence requirements. But I will say this, I did see there's been a lot of discussion about Black-owned businesses getting a seat at the table. And I would say this, I've been around a little longer to see that in the past 15 years, that's been a constant discussion. I remember even MGM, there was a big discussion of that. So what has been the effort that the council has made thus far to actually increase the actual number of minority businesses in these contracts? Because they're still pretty low despite the attack that, on the labor side they're getting. I still see low numbers when it comes to minority-owned business. So we can do both because there's space, because there's still not enough even now.
Sure. So, and let me jump back a little bit. There have been project labor agreements in Prince George's County. The Lower Library initially had a project labor agreement and had to be pulled off of the project. The Brandywine Fire Station, which was at the time I was a District 9 member, and that was in my district, and added a couple of years to that project because of labor related issues to the project and costs. So we do have some experience. The power station in Brandywine had a project labor agreement. And they fell short of meeting the local hiring requirement, in large part because as you got to the higher construction specialty trades, they could not fill them with county residents. So they didn't meet their local hiring requirements. So we do have some experience. When there was a recent conversation about project labor agreements, someone reminded me that the MGM National Harbor project had a modified version of it. And so this contractor recounted that because there's so few minority companies in the county that are union signatory firms, when the threshold of the project labor agreement kicked in, $5 million or greater. So that contractor mentioned to me that they were limited in opportunity to the $5 million or less projects within the MGM National Harbor. Once you got above $5 million, because there were so few minority companies that were union signatory contractors in the county, those opportunities didn't flow to minority businesses in the county. Again, I'm just recounting for you the facts of how things have unfolded. Now, if you're saying that you're going to chart a different future, hey, good luck and God bless. But just understand the reason you're going to hear a lot of negative feedback from particularly the Black business community when it comes to project labor agreements is that there have not been, I guess, enough outreach to encourage more of them to become union signatory firms, and that's going to continue to be a problem as you try to argue for project labor agreements. I do want to mention on the asbestos contract, I appreciate it, but again, we have a challenge with our young African American youth. We talked about jobs. We talked about all those things. If we're not hiring African American youth and hiring African Americans in the county on these projects, that's a big problem. It's not enough to say, hey, great, I'm glad that project hired a good number of county residents, but I was troubled to see that only 3% were Black. And I'll close by saying on the asbestos contract, neither of those two contractors were Prince George's County firms.
The county firm that applied was not lowest bid, we went through a procurement process. So, the school board did not pick these people, the school's procurement office did.
No, but there's a requirement on the contract of a certain percentage.
Just the other thing that I'll say.
They have to fill it.
Thank you. The other thing that I would say is that I feel like there's an artificial divide that is occurring because before there was a PLA on the asbestos contract, I don't think anyone in this room could tell me the percentage of young Black boys that was involved. Can't. And so there are so many scopes of work, and there's so many projects. And so the notion that just because this one turned out this way doesn't mean that we can't tell other things from the purposes. We have a big county budget, we have WSSC, we have the school system, we have the memorial library system, we have park and planning. And I would just urge this council to not allow artificial divides to our community apart. But really, we should be looking at ensuring all of Prince George's people, young, old, Black, white, Hispanic, that we all thrive. Particularly our Black businesses. I've been Black all my life. And so the notion that pro-labor council members are anti-Black businesses just couldn't be further from the truth.
And I'll add this too, I think we also understand and will and have these conversations with our labor partners that we have expectations of seeing more Black students in their apprenticeship programs. And so I want to say that for the record here today, that issue is not lost on us. That ensuring that there's also a history in the labor movement of being very white space. And we have to understand that in building trades and across the board, that we want to make sure that you make a valid point on making sure that there's more Black construction businesses at the table in the building trades. And we are going to advocate for that and ensure that they do their due diligence when it comes to recruitment. Because we do feel like that is part of the issue and part of that what builds into that narrative of the divide. So we take an active role in making sure that that does change. So I just want to make sure that we don't gloss over that as being an issue. It's really important that, and what we plan on being is holding everyone to task, to Councilman Borrell's point, is that we want the same standard across the board, and just like we want to see better standards and better actors for some of these small businesses when it comes to practices of healthcare, your hiring and wage. We also want the unions to do a better job of making sure that we see ourselves reflected in the purchasing programs, training programs, and the businesses that are at the table. So I think to your point, that different, how we're gonna be doing it differently, because I think that we have both of those lenses, and that we're gonna be walking both entities through the process of saying what we can do better to make sure that at the end, to Councilman Burrow's point, that everyone's thriving, because we do realize that's an issue. I'm very apologetic about, supporting Black-owned businesses. I have no problem naming that, putting that as a forefront. And so we're gonna do everything we can to make sure that they have equal opportunity as well.
Thank you. What I take away from this is that GOFP is going to be a very engaging committee. And I think it's fantastic that we had a spirited, professional discussion and debate about policy issues. In the past, my experience has been the councils try to keep that out of the limelight. And I think we need to highlight the fact that we've got strong, intelligent leaders who can really dig into the policy issues. So, unfortunately, time's up for today. But GOFP and some other committees are going to be very interesting, which I think is fantastic. Now, Mr. Harrison, you will put in.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick point, and I'm going to pivot away from that discussion real fast. I've made suggestions in the past about this, and I think it's something we need to look at. It goes to Councilmember Burrow's comments and Chair of Human Services and Public Safety. But I kind of feel like there's been some silos working in different entities. How do you bring those silos together, right? And just for access for children to have opportunity to compete within sports. What's Park and Recreation's role with public safety in order to make sure that message gets out? And how does that get out? And I think that there's a little bit of, is there advertising that goes on our public safety vehicles through Park and Recs that gives us a QR code that they can scan or something that can register their child? It centralizes the admission of getting our children enrolled. I've made that point, but I feel like there needs to be a collaboration between public safety and Park and Recreations to make sure that our youth have access to these things. And maybe that is part of how we keep crime down as well.
Thank you. A lot of things we need to do, and a lot of other parties we need to bring together. We're going to break for lunch in just 1 second. I would say, I'm trying to say, there's a couple county council housekeeping items. One, we're going to talk about bringing back the 3-minute pre-council sessions open mic. Another thing that we're working with the clerk, we have the deadline of signing up to speak 3 o'clock the day before. But really what that relates to being able to contribute real comments so they can be disseminated. So we're looking at extending the time to sign up to speak to the beginning of the session that you're doing, so 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock on Monday morning, so that people have extra time. The concept is, before COVID, you walk into a council meeting, committee meeting, and you can sign up on the spot, and you're good to go. But since COVID, you had to sign up at 3 o'clock the day before. So written comments will still be by 3 o'clock. But signing up to speak will hopefully go to 10 o'clock the next morning. I guess we have to ask a question what happens if it's an afternoon committee at 1:30, what's the deadline, we haven't figured that out. We're working on that. Another thing that we've not done that other jurisdictions do is try to put a long-range agenda now, so that, in other words, you wouldn't see the January agendas until the Friday night or Saturday morning of that weekend. We know things that are going to be on the agendas, and it's better for my council colleagues to know what's coming, so you're not surprised, and it's also better for your constituents that they can plan ahead. Now, there will obviously be caveats that things can change, but better to give people an understanding of what's coming so that they can make arrangements all across the board. So that's residents, businesses. Those are a couple of housekeeping items that we're looking at doing. One of the things that I'm very interested in, I asked Josh from the policy group months ago if he would start analyzing the boards and commissions to see are they functioning, are they meeting regularly, are they putting on minutes, do they have agendas? If you look at the county website for a lot of the boards and commissions, you find very little information. We're not getting much feedback. You might be annual report, but then we don't get briefing the annual report. You just have to take it on yourself, find it, and then you look it up. So really get briefed by the policy group about how things are doing for various boards and commissions, and what's obsolete perhaps and what's not. So lunch. Thank you. What's the lunch plan, Madam Clerk?
Co-workers and then our labor partners, just so that we can get back on schedule and well. That's okay.